Today, we're going to go down to see a pop culture ballet. The hype is so real, trust me, it's a big deal for geeks of every type. It's so great. Don't fight me like Clark Kent with that Grey Hulk rip-off Doomsday. I'll give it to you straight. Honestly, just trust me this one time. It's awesome. Comic-Con, it's the best. Just look at how everyone is dressed. Comic-Con, I love it. If you hate it, you're a hypocrite. Cosplayers everywhere, and podcasters so debonair. So if you act uncool, I will stab you with my katanas like the merc with the mouth Deadpool. Da 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 da. You say comics are stupid and are full of crap. Then bring your face closer, 'cause it needs a slap. And oh, don't bash your fandom, 'cause you don't understand them. I'll clip your ears in tandem. This is my memorandum. Don't test me, I'm crazy. Don't believe me, hey, just ask Disney. Comic-Con, oh my god. If you want the truth, just ask my squad. Go outside, are you mad? Anything else is a passing fad. The haters I will fight, plus anyone dressed as the Dark Knight. Don't you dare act uncool. I will use maximum effort, like Deathstroke done right. Deadpool. Da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 da. Everybody. Da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da.
Welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. And this week we're live at Meanwhile Comic-Con. Cue the music! And once again, David forgot to bring the theme song. Well done, David.
Insert music here.
In fairness, I do this even when we're actually recording. we pause to put in the music, and I still do it every time.
Every damn time. As I said, hello capers and welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. My name is Scott James Merridew, and this is the show where we talk about various geek and nerd related topics and are joined each week by some very special different guests. And this week, seeing as we're surrounded by so many lovely creative people, we've got a lot of people today. At the end we have my editor in cape, my generalissimo, the man who, if he ordered me into the gates of hell, I would say after you. It is David Molofsky.
Hey!
Hello. And it's definitely you first, Scott.
Damn, a place to hang your cape and its contractual obligations. And so next to him, she's responsible for Heart of Time at NPCT, which I always have to be really concentrating on when I say. It's Sarah Millman.
Hey!
Right next to me, creative of James, the mind of James Fungal, and so many other things, it's impossible to count them all. It's Lyndon White!
Hey!
Out in the middle there, he is an Englishman in San Diego. You've seen him from the other panels today. Give it up for Leonard Sultana!
is actually my real name as well. That's so distressing.
It's unique. It stands out.
It's my current name. We'll move on.
And today, Capers, what we're going to be talking about, seeing as we talk about so many people who either read a lot of comics or make a lot of comments or comment a lot of comics, we're going to be talking about comics at a comic convention, whatever next. We're going to be specifically talking about the comics that inspired us, that had an impact on our lives, that got us into comics in the first place. We're each going to go down the list, and we're going to have 3 different comics that we're going to talk about why we like it so much, and other people say why they hate it so much. It's going to be an awful lot of fun. And to get the ball rolling, we're going to start off with David. Give us your very first pick of your most impactful, inspirational comic of your life.
So no pressure, right? Okay.
Absolutely none. All the pressure.
So I obviously we've been playing this for a while, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And the first comic that popped in my mind was very clear, which is Daredevil Volume 2. I read it when I was about 13, I think, and it starts with a story by Kevin Smith, and I was very into Kevin Smith at the time, much to my humiliation? I don't know. No one really likes Jay and Silent Bob anymore.
What's the hate for Kevin Smith?
I don't know. I don't really. I feel like it's gone up and down. Red State was horrible. I'm just.
Okay, so that's
so not on a personal level, just his comic output.
Artistically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then he disappointed us much later when he did 1 issue of a 4-issue run of Daredevil and then never went back. Anyway, so the one that he actually did finish, it's a story. It kicks off a whole new volume of Daredevil. It's famous for being the death of Karen Page. It involves
that well-utilized character that never had anything bad happen to her in the comics.
It's yeah. Anyway, it's got Bullseye in it, and it's got some twists and turns. It's all about this. It's pulling on like the Catholic roots of the story, and very much trying to be about. It's basically whether or not this child is actually the Antichrist, and giving Daredevil this ethical dilemma of, well, if it is, should he kill it? Which is...
As a conflict I think we've all faced at some point in our lives. Do I kill this baby that may or not be the son of the devil?
You've met my brother as well.
He left an impression.
But it was a comic that got me into Daredevil for sure. Also, it's Joe Quesada Jr. doing the art, and it's just fantastic. I had a poster of one of the covers for years in my room. It's one of those, like, it's very inky, very, like, deep colors, like those purples and reds that really, like, speak to, I think, Daredevil as a character and stuff. It was really fun. I don't know. So that was my first one. I've been reading it over and over for years, especially the Guardian Devil one, but I think Echo comes after that, and then it kicks off into the Brian, the Bendis run.
All right.
Which is also really good. So that's my first one.
It's a good start, I think. Sarah.
Oh,
let's
we're
hear
doing
your...
one at a time.
Yeah.
Yes,
we are an organised, ordered society.
Well, I was just trying to cheat a little bit because I have my choice, but I could not remember who wrote it, which is utterly terrible. I think it was Bendis. Okay. Runaways, the first.
Brian K. Vaughan.
Brian K. Vaughan. That's what I was trying to think of.
That's why I paused for a minute too.
Yeah,
I was like,
I'm just trying to subtly Google it, and my attention like, cool.
Who the guy that wrote the Runaways?
I know the comics, but yeah, it was probably like, because I always found as a child going into a comic book shop really difficult. Firstly, because most of the time they'd be like, you're a girl, here is the manga, which, to be fair, most of the time that is what I was looking for.
Damn you, patriarchy!
We've seen your comics.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just also, I found reading Marvel very impenetrable. So at the time, like, I think Runaways came out at a really good time to be like, right, this is a new story, characters jump in and out that you may recognize, you might not, and if you don't, it's perfectly fine. And I just thought it was a really tight story. And also, I still have the volume of Runaways that I bought as a, like, 15-year-old. And the cover has come off, the jacket has come off. It's been in my room, so the spine is sun damaged. Like, if you open it out, there was a printing error, so the final issue is in the middle of the comic. So, because I read it for the first time, I was like, that ended really abrupt. Where are they going to go from here? Oh. And there is...
You read on later, oh my god, this character's a zombie!
Have you read... Yeah, pretty much. There is a massive twist in it. Like, have you read the original Run Runaway?
I read all the way up to the point where Chase started wearing Crocs, then I thought, nope!
And that run, it was such a shame as well, because I really got even that bit, I was invested, and then suddenly it came to such an abrupt end. And I think as well, like when, my brain, I have convention brain, the Buffy dude.
Joss Whedon?
When Joss Whedon took
Buffy
over.
dude!
Buffy dude.
That's what I call him. I don't know.
I'm glad you could translate
Joss
that.
Whedon. I'm sorry, Firefly dude. What would you prefer?
I would prefer Dollhouse dude. That's what I prefer.
Oh my word, going deep,
Come
dude.
on, he's the Avengers dude.
Yeah. But
Whole other conversation.
I feel that like his run on Runaways was a bit. Everyone was so excited for it. I'm like,
I liked it.
I liked it.
They went
but
to the past.
original-
I think I stopped before that happened.
Yeah, I wasn't that invested.
But you were at the
For
beginning.
what the first run was a really tight story that
Beautiful coming of age story.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
good coming of age story with really interesting characters that were all kind of diverse as well, which I thought was good. And it
It's
was
also
good
a
idea.
clever addition.
Sounds like every Brian K. Vaughan story ever
Yeah.
written.
I also thought it was really
But with less,
clever
TV
way to-
people.
Well, yes.
It was also a clever way to do an origin story. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like a that standard. Oh, and now they have powers, and now they're gonna learn that with great power comes great response. It was sort of like they're kind of just gonna not have that. It's a bit slower. It's a bit different.
Focus on the emotional core.
Yeah. Especially
Yeah.
in the TV show adaptation that came out this year.
I'm afraid to watch
It's
it. just
really
'cause
good.
It's so
Well,
clever.
Vaughn
It's not the
Vaughn-
same as the comic,
the-
but it's a faithful into its spirit.
And also Vaughn is an executive producer, so it's very true to a lot of the heart of the characters.
And yes, they do have the dinosaur.
Oh yeah.
It's there.
It's
It's real.
Ooh.
So, moving on. Leonard, let's
Yes.
hear your first pick.
Well, the brief was comics that changed my life. Right. It's going to be the Dandy annual 1977.
You're a dandy person?
I am a dandy person.
As a Beano person, I am shocked and offended.
I read both. I did read both, but
you're one of those
I'm one
people.
of those. I sit on the fence badly. But no, the Dandy was the one because it had Corky the cat in there. It was a red cover, and it was one of those obviously printed in the UK dirt cheap that it was black, white, or black with red to do the shades, and that was it. If you were basically colorblind, if you couldn't determine red, you were screwed.
That's me.
But there you go then. I mean, these would be of no use whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I remember drawing out the characters on pieces of A4 construction paper, or the big construction paper on my, because I moved up from Southampton to Yorkshire when I was 7. So I had all these comics which I would then just draw out, and I cannot draw, by the way. I absolutely my artistic skills fall horrendously short. But I could copy, and I copy. And I seem to remember copying comics up to Mad Magazine when I was 15, 16. But that was the first one I did, and the stories were. It jumped between your Corky the Cats and your kind of your Bash Street Kids kind of things, which were obviously dandy, but into kind of like there was an Indian story in there where a young kid meets, or he's getting bullied at school, and he discovers an Indian statue with all the little the totem pole, and the totem pole came alive and beat up the bullies, which was odd. For a kid, that was bizarre, and I loved it, and I just loved the imagination of the whole thing, and it just really got me into comics because it was just a new way of telling stories. So there you go, that's mine. I know it's not as mainstream as many, but that's my
okay.
first.
Yeah.
That's my
You're
first.
fine with non-mainstream.
Oh, trust me, then you're going
Wait
to
till we
enjoy
get
the
to my
rest of
third
them.
one.
You're going to love the rest of my choices then.
Excellent.
Okay. Moving swiftly on, we're going to talk to Lyndon. What's your first pick?
Mine's quite a broad choice, but it's the collections that you can get in W.H. Smith, particularly the Amazing Spider-Man ones, because these were my comics growing up. I'm from quite a small town, so there'd be maybe 2 or 3 of these books in the shop, and it'd be look if you got to it before the other kids. So these are what I knew comics were. These were my version of comics until I was about 14 when I actually went to a comic book shop for the first time. I just loved them, and I've still got them, and I used to reread them all over again, and I just love the fact that one week you'd have 3 stories by 3 different artists, and then next month it could be something completely different, or it could follow on. And it's what I used to read until I got into manga years later. And I still love that they're still part of the UK. Granted, they've become much more expensive to get hold of. But I like it because every time I go into WH Smith's, I can still see them, and I can tell that for people who can't necessarily get hold of comics as easily as we can because we go to these events, still kids that can go and pick those up. I particularly liked that they're aimed at adults as well. I used to hate reading comics that patronised kids. I really disliked the cartoony ones, like the version of Spider-Man that was aimed at a younger audience. I found it was really patronising, even as a kid.
In this issue, Spider-Man is now king of a European country.
Exactly.
I always found the worst was when they introduced a random kid to be the POV character, and it was like,
thanks, Billy, you helped save the
day.
day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gee whiz, Spider-Man, you sure is great that you were here.
So I avoided all that kind of stuff, and then got the better storytelling from the adult versions.
Yeah. Well, they don't talk down to kids, they talk with children, and actually, that's a whole separate rant. We're not going to go into that. You know what I am going to go into? Let me just treat kids not as adults, but as people with actual brains, because I'm pretty sure they have them. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think I need to check.
Breathe.
So any one particular ones that you like to single out?
I can't even remember the stories at this point, but it was generally...
Clearly they had a big impact.
Yeah, exactly. There's one, I can't remember the artist or writer, but there's a really good one with the Lizard and Spider-Man in the swamp, and he was really out of his element, and that was probably my favourite one. That's one I used to go back to all the time, particularly because Kirk Connors is very human in it when he transforms as well. So
very compelling character that I'm sure Sony won't exploit.
No.
Again.
Another one for another day. Speaking with Spider-Man, moving on to my one. I'm going to cheat now because I can do that because I'm the host. I can do whatever I want. You can't stop me. I'm going to do both the original Amazing Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man, not the TV series. No.
Very clear distinction there.
No. Because it's the best combination of both the old style and the new style. Because I used to, I don't know if any of you guys ever read like the essential Marvel, so like you get black and white previews.
The newspaper kind of.
The newspaper ones, which always made your fingers and nails dirty. But it was great because I got to just read those old comics, and I like to think they were just as impactful on me when I was 7, 8, and 9 when I first read them, as it would have been if I was alive during the 60s and reading these for the first time. I connected with these characters. It's a testament to the writing. It may seem a bit old-fashioned, retro, and hokey now, but it does actually, I think, stand the test of time. It really does. It connected me with some way. It's like, this is a real character, real depth and emotion. Yeah, the early ones is a little bit like, gee, Aunt May, thanks for all the wheat cakes. But then it goes into a bit serious. Like, I remember, I think it was like the last, I don't know if this is right, but it was the last issue that Steve Ditko did, or maybe the first one Jack Kirby did, I don't know. But it ended with Spider-Man seeing a little mannequin statue in like a garbage dump somewhere that looked a bit like Ned Leeds. We didn't like at that moment because he was getting with his girl. And he's just like, I hate you, Ned Leeds. You know why? Because you can have a normal life and I can't. And he punches it. And it's just like, this was... I think that's the point where it really marked the turn of comic books into something like, yeah, maybe they're for kids at least at that point, but that doesn't mean they have to be bad. They can have actual characters with actual pathos that have art. And I think that became fully exemplified years and years later with Brian Michael Bendis in Ultimate Spider-Man, where they actually took the Spider-Man mythos and the origin story, but updated it for a modern audience, but updated it in the clever way, in the real way, with real characters, in a fresh new take that wasn't patronizing or exploitative or just dumb. No, it was just interesting. And so for someone who couldn't really didn't have access to a lot of comics. So I did not grow up in a very media-savvy household. I was like, here, do you want a Beano? Yes, please. And I liked the Beano, but that's basically all I had access to. I had to seek it out. And when I did, and I was rewarded with interesting stories with actual, again, character development. And I cannot overemphasize the impact that can have on a young mind. It really, we're talking about things that are really impactful. That's what set me on this path. It's all Brian Michael Bendis' fault. This ruin of a man you see before you.
That's been said a lot of times.
You know, I had a colleague who just was asking me to recommend to get his 11-year-old son into comics. I actually recommended Ultimate Spider-Man, and apparently he read the entire run in like 3 weeks.
Hundreds of episodes.
There's hundreds of issues, and apparently he just went through like the whole thing. And I was like, oh, okay, so now I need to recommend something else, and I'm like now racking my brain. So, like, I thought that would last the kid a year at least.
Recommend Ultimate X-Men. No. We won't go into that. What we will go into is David's second choice.
Well, I was actually going to say Ultimate X-Men. I don't know.
David, you are dead to me.
No, you're right. I was going to say The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck.
For the capers in the audience who don't quite realise, I hate Disney. So to him say that to me is like
word.
stabbing my sainted mother in the face.
So my real second choice.
The exit is right over there, in case you're wondering.
Yeah. So I was actually going to say Preacher was actually the one. I got into that. I was still probably too young to read it, but I was about 16 when I got into that. I started off with
the rebellious years.
Yeah. I got in Sandman had gotten me into Vertigo, and I was like, ooh, what else do they have?
Wait, is this a Neil Gaiman Sandman or Mystery Sandman Theatre Sandman?
Neil Gaiman Sandman.
Okay, because no one's read the Mystery Sandman Theatre one. I'm alone.
Well, Neil Gaiman has.
Just call him up. He'll be happy to talk to you about it, I'm sure.
I'm sure, yeah.
So, for anyone who hasn't read Preacher, it's another. I don't know why. So I'm the Jewish American boy who's really into all the Catholic comics. I don't know why, but it's about a small town preacher in Texas who gets bonded with the offspring of an angel and a demon, and basically gains the power to. Gives the word of God, so if he says you have to do something, you have to do it, kind of thing. And then there's this whole search throughout the book, literally for God, who is missing. And it is one of the most messed up books that I have ever read. There is a lot of...
Not for a younger audience.
Yeah, there's some younger kids in the audience, so I won't mention some of the really awful things in that book, but there is...
It definitely earns the suggestive for mature readers title.
Yes, I would definitely say
Absolutely.
I'm just imagining like a little old lady. Oh, it's a nice comic book about a nice pastel. That'll be like, oh no!
Yeah, I think the one thing that still sticks with me to this day is there's a scene in the second trade where it's a flashback to the main character's childhood where his cousins are picking on him by putting him in a coffin underwater with a tube up into the air and leaving him there for days. And it's like, for me, I was like, well, that's not my nightmare. And I feel like
Siblings,
it's just
what are you gonna do?
like that's like the worst. That's not even the worst thing in that particular issue of the comic. So it's great. So to say
And something about that really spoke to you, did it?
and something about the thing is that it's really well written and it's really well drawn by Steve Dillon, and it's
Again, because it's not. It is kind of exploitative, but it's exploitative in like a Quentin Tarantino, like sort of aware sort of way. Like it's exploitative, but it's not just for the sake of being exploitative. It's to get the messages and themes across.
And the whole point of the book is more about how like the world is turning into crap because God is missing. But it's also like the way it's just the way it's drawn. And I reread it recently, and Dillon does this thing with the panels where he lays them out, and he really gets at that page turn. It's like it really leaves you on the right page. You really want to turn and find out what happened next. And he does the reveals on the left-hand side of the page really well, which sounds like a very technical and weird thing to say as a compliment, but it really makes the reading experience more enjoyable when it's like, oh, and then there's going to be that surprise.
A lot of comic book writers go to David for blurbs,
Yeah. The lettering was amazing in that one panel. That's actually on the back of Sarah's book. I don't know if everyone's seen, but But yeah, it's also a skill, and I think it's not something that a lot of comic writers always employ. Is that like that reveal, and to see it used so well so often actually made me read the books a lot faster. Which is probably why I actually made it through the whole thing.
I know it was a team up between the two. It was definitely a partnership of the work, and I know that Garth and Steve, they actually met up with the deliberate intention of doing stuff like that, and it was all from Steve's perspective as well. That man was a genius. He really was.
So the Capers listening at home, someone just delivered Lyndon a coffee, scurried up and plonked it down, and the rest of us have gotten diddly.
Guest badge.
I know my place.
Would you like to share?
No, I'm fine.
I'll stick here with my water.
I got nothing.
I do apologise, you were saying.
Okay, yeah, feature.
No, you were saying about Dylan.
No, the man's a genius. As simple as if you do get the chance to read any of his work, he up to his passing, he just never lost. He put his foot down on the accelerator and he never took it off. The man was. We miss him with every passing year. Anyway,
So,
how about that for a bright ending?
Sarah, cheer us up.
Oh no. Well, in my head I was thinking, should I do this one next or this one next? Shall we go dark or should we go ridiculous?
let's just
Dealer's
Go where you like.
Let's-
Go where you like.
Keep it dark? Okay.
We've already dug this hole. We
I-
may as well keep going.
Again, something else that I was probably a little bit too young to read was Blade of the Immortal by Hiroaki Samura. So good.
so good.
Basically, like
I have not heard. Tell more.
really good. So it's basically about this immortal swordsman called Manji who cannot be killed, and bits of his.
I think that's what immortal
he does-
means.
Well, yeah, Blade of the Immortal. Who would have guessed? He literally does not know how much of him could be cut off before he dies. He has these little.
And he's not
worms
willing
in
to
his-
experiment.
He's not willing. Well, he does get pushed to the extreme in part of the story, and it's about him and this girl. I forget the name of the girl, Rin, who Rin's parents are killed by this group of swordsmen, and she employs Manji to be her bodyguard and to help her seek revenge on these swordsmen. And it's
Revenge!
It is, yeah, basically. But it is just beautiful. I didn't realise for a really long time that Hiroaki Samura used pencils, so the whole thing is in pencils. And his draftsmanship is amazing. There's a really good art book of it as well.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
I was so annoyed. I went to Japan and I was like, oh my god, I've got this special book that no one else has. It's all in Japanese and it's backwards and it's all of it's all of his artwork. This is so exclusive. Came home and Dark Horse had just released it. I was just like, and at the back there's this wonderful interview with him, like about how he all of his techniques, and I was just like, okay, great, I've got it. I'll just learn Japanese.
I'll just learn Japanese.
It's fine. So, my time to be smug had passed. But it's just, again, it's one of those things that I think I was far too young to read, but just the storytelling was so good, and it takes a lot of cues from like westerns as well, which is like a lot of like samurai movies and westerns, they play off each other. There's lots of like times when Rin is just holding everything together and starving and trying to like find ways to get by, because there are light elements to it, but it's so gritty. I think the one thing that kind of I got annoyed because as a kid I could only get single issues that Dark Horse brought out and what my comic book shop would have in stock at the time.
We are slaves to imports from other countries.
So it was ages until I finally finished it, and I'm not going to ruin it because if you read it, like, it is such a roller coaster. In the end, I kind of thought was a bit packed. It kind of it was a happy ending, and I was a bit like, oh come on, okay. But
So you talked about the art style. Is there anything in particular that you can remember that really stands out?
oh well.
Putting you on the spot right now.
What do you mean in terms of the
Like any panels
pages?
or-
Yeah.
Or, there's like
Yes, in
a
terms of the
really
art.
good- There's a really all right.
Issue 7, panel 5.
Well, issue 62. There's an amazing in the art book. So it was one of the covers, I think, of just Rin reaching and lifting her. It's from the perspective of looking at her straight on. So you're looking at her foot, and she's basically like stretching and she's reaching and pulling her foot back at the same time as like pulling
Those
her
at
head.
home,
gonna mime it.
Sarah is
Trying to
actually
mime
reenacting
and it's
this.
just so she's on the floor and doing it, and just the expression and the like, because she's using pencil, it's got so much movement in it, and just
You can see the tension.
you can see even like the wrinkles in her foot as she pulls it back, And it's just because, like when you've got that arch of the foot, you can see all the different veins and wrinkles that are there.
I'm not a foot doctor, I don't know.
Well, you can see it. But yeah, it's just so beautiful and yet so gory and disgusting at other parts. So it's
I think
great.
there's something to be
Hey, kids,
said
do you like
about,
something gory and
when
disgusting?
when you're that age, discovering something that's totally
Oh my
inappropriate.
goodness.
Like even whether it's
Yeah.
books or movies or something, it's like I feel like those are the ones you remember a lot. Like the first time you watch.
I didn't, I was a
kid,
good boy.
You
Really?
may want to
Yeah.
earmuffs for a minute.
Convincing
but,
nobody.
But I'm running workshops at the moment for kids, and it's just funny that you're like the amount of things that they come up with, and they're like, I've just done a story about people getting decapitated. Anyway, you're like, okay, so yeah, I think yeah, some kids are more ready. For
The story of the bloody axe murderer by Polly, age 6.
You know what?
Sure, okay.
That would get so kick-started so quickly.
But
wasn't that
An autobiography.
yeah, Axe
Oh,
Cop,
God.
yeah.
Moving on, Leonard, let's hear
Yes.
your second pick.
My second pick is an individual issue, and it's of a comic which some of you may know, some of you may not. It was published by Fleetway back in the 80s. It's Warrior, issue 4. The reason why I've chosen it is because I actually collected Warrior for the first 30-odd issues, and it hurts me to this day that I sold them as a kid. This is the book that first had the appearance of V for Vendetta. It was the book that first had Marvel Man, or Miracle Man as it were, but no, it was Marvel Man back then. It had Dave Gibbons doing Night Raven. It had Axel Press Button, so you had 2 Alan Moore stories in there for the price of 1. And it was the first comic I read where all of a sudden I became a man. I was a boy, and then I became a man, because it was grown-up comics. It was bought for me by my parents because it was a comic, and thankfully my parents were pretty accommodating for that. In that, if it was half decent pictures in there, then they would, Leonard will like that. There you go, give him that. But they bought me Warrior, and Marvel Man didn't appear in the first 2 issues, but they did. It kicked off in issue 3. Issue 4 is when you had Kid Marvel Man show up. The story had just pretty much gotten developed. Alan Moore was really on slow burn at this point, and the idea was, if you don't know the story of Marvel Man, a slubbish 40-year-old bloke is starting to have dreams of him being a superhero. And he discovers that, in actual fact, he was. Back in the day, he was a superhero. He just happened to forget, or he was forced to forget. And
We've all had days like that.
Oh, don't we all? Don't we all? And he also learnt that he had a sidekick back in the days. The original Marvel Man strip was originally a strip back in the 50s, 60s, I believe. And it was very pulpy. It was very much trying to get onto the American market, produced here in the UK.
Back when the copyright laws were a little
absolutely,
bit lax.
very much lax in this regard. And the original, it really was capes and superheroes in the original strip. And he had a Kid Marvel Man. He had a sidekick.
You won't win this day, evil bad man.
Absolutely.
Gases!
That's the one. Episode 2, the lead character is remembering these things and goes to discover the alter ego of Kid Marvel Man, who has now grown up and is a billionaire industrialist, at which point the conversation starts getting very dark very quickly, and you discover that Kid Marvel Man is pretty much bitter that he has not been able to transform back into Kid Marvel Man because Marvel Man has not transformed back using the magic word Kimota, which was
Sounds like a camera company.
atomic backward.
Oh.
Yeah, you see. Oh. Anyway,
Take that, Captain Marvel.
so the main, so like I say, the main character has rediscovered his power. Kid Marvel Man is now discovering that he can now transform back into Kid Marvel Man. And he effectively attacks Marvel Man. He has effectively gone mental. He's gone utterly insane.
As happens to many a teenage
As
sidekick.
indeed. Well, he's known he's had all this power, this potential inside of him. He just hasn't been able to transform himself because Marvel Man has. At which point it then turns into a god-awful battle. And Alan Moore is on the top of his strength. Gary Leach is drawing these evocative panels. There's this lightning storm going off, and it's just dark, and it wasn't the dandy. It wasn't. It wasn't too. It was. I mean, even 2000 AD was still very much Wobby the Robot and very kind of.
Was it Walter
was
the
all,
Robot?
Walter the Robot. Sorry, it was all very kind of cutesy. This wasn't.
This is back when Judge Dredd
This
had
was
it made.
this was hard.
Yeah.
This was hard comics, and there was that. I mean, Night Raven by Dave Gibbons as well, which had no speech bubbles. It was a black and white noir piece. That was unlike anything I'd ever seen because absolutely, and there's no speech bubbles, and it was all done by just this.
Is that the moment when you realised, oh my god, wait, this is
It's
art?
it's a different story. Yeah, absolutely. V for Vendetta, which if you've read the original book, you know how good that thing is.
Oh, yeah.
Just that, and not only that, but the cover as well was referencing another one of the stories, which was Axel Pressbutton, and one of the characters is a madman, and it's a white panel, and it's the madman falling in background, and the text is, when you're a madman, where do you fall when where do you go when a madman falls? Blah, blah, blah. And it just follows this, and it's just such a gorgeous cover. It was just the moment when, for me, comics grew up, and then I went into following, like reading Crisis and all sorts of other grown-up comics, and yeah, that's when, if you get the chance, you're not going to find the original Warrior issues anymore, but I would certainly check out V for Vendetta. I'd check out, if you can find it, well, you can now. You can get the original Marvel Mans, because they've been reprinted by DC. Get them, because that's Alan Moore at his most demented.
Oh, well, that's what we like to hear.
Even more so than Swamp Thing, in my mind.
Swamp Thing.
I always thought
Okay,
the most demented
yeah.
was Lost Girls.
We're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
You all know
I'll say
we're not doing that.
Swamp Thing is where he's most sexual. Marvel Man is where he's just going nuts. It's more psychotic than
Fair enough.
most. But
Lyndon.
yeah.
What are our reactions to this, please?
Well, it's funny you should mention psychotic. Mine is Arkham Asylum, Serious House on Serious Earth.
What a book!
Indeed, this book.
DC.
What a book!
Now, before we get started, I don't read a lot of Batman comics, but this is a Batman comic, and it's been my favourite one since I read it. It's Grant Morrison writing it, and Dave McKean on the artwork, and it's incredible. It broke my brain. It got handed to me in college when I wasn't too sure what I was doing with my artwork. I knew I wanted to do comics, but I didn't want to do like the typical superhero art. And then I was really, really into painting and fine art. And then my tutor gave me this book, and it was perfect. It was the right place at the right time. It's two stories. It's set with Arkham, the founder of the asylum, and telling his story of how he set it up. And it's telling the story of Batman going into the asylum because it's been taken over by the inmates. And they're two separate
Because
stories.
Arkham Asylum has always been so well run.
Oh yeah, the security's great.
Yeah.
So these two stories start off, and it goes back and forth, and slowly but surely you realise that each story is influencing the other one, even though they're completely different and separate points in time. And it gives the impression that the asylum is essentially a reflection of Batman's brain. It's very grown up, and the artwork is incredible. It's all mixed media painted.
It's one of McKean's best.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it was sort of like, the problem with it, it was so good that every book after that book, people wanted him to do that. Even though his, funny enough, his ink drawings look nothing like it as well. Yeah. He just, he developed that style for that book. But it's incredible. It's probably, easily one of the best Batman stories ever done.
So it's focusing on the psychological aspect.
Yeah, and it's got fresh takes on all the villains. You'll see Two-Face. They've deconstructed.
Now I'm going to roll a dice.
Actually,
Well,
no.
I was joking.
They break him down so much that instead of using the coin, they've broken him down to using a dice, so he has 6 choices. breaking him down again. So he has a deck of cards. So each card represents a choice, and that's a way to try and cure him, so he can actually have.
Someone get the Snapdragon.
Well, no, the next thing that they were going to go for was the I Ching. They were going to try and break his personality so he could make the world wasn't so black and white. What is such a done.
It's got. I mean,
so well done.
They actually got a lot of slack for how they did fresh takes on the characters. Some of the loyal Batman fans didn't like it, but if you read that, I can't believe comic fans didn't like something different.
They're always such an easygoing bunch, you know.
It's just like that book is so famous, really. Like the first time I saw it was in a museum, actually.
Yeah,
I saw some of the original artwork
Yeah.
in a museum. Some comic exhibit, but it's like it's so incredible that the impact of that book.
Yeah.
Like, of course, it would have that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the books that changed comics in terms of comics can be more than just superheroes by themselves or superheroes as typical
They
superhero
could
art.
be introspective.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those books that if I didn't get that book, I wouldn't be making comics now, because I wouldn't have been able to see the scope of what the medium could do.
So DC has actually put something good into the world.
Yeah, they got me in the game.
There you go.
That's the first time that's ever happened.
No.
Moving.
I'm picking a DC thing next. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
trying to rack my brain, change my
Shock.
choices.
Not
Go on,
big a
then.
DC fan either. Okay, it's anything beginning with D. Except for someone you mentioned, Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore, talking about Watchmen. Yeah, because talking about things that make you grow up. This really made me grow up. Came to it when I was a teenager, and before, I like superheroes, I like Marvel characters and all sorts. I never really thought of superheroes exploring deeper, more complex themes in a standalone sort of way. Nowadays we've got slightly more Watchmen stuff around, but back then it was just this one idea, exploring these concepts and these characters in its full glory. And yeah, there was some shocking things, some things that maybe I was a bit too young to read, but then I was like 15, 16, so it wasn't too bad. And it really spoke to me, because oh my god, this is actually someone who's taking this really, really seriously. They're going for this in a really big way, to the point where in A-level English class we had to bring in our favourite book, and everyone brought in stupid, boring prose books. I brought in Watchmen. Oh yeah, and someone said that doesn't count. I think you'll find it does count. You know why? Do you know why? Because Thram! I may be exaggerating a teeny weeny bit, but it's so fascinating, and still is, because it explored these complex themes that actually made me question something about me today. I do often go back in my head, should I never compromise, even in the face of Armageddon? Or is compromise the way to possible lasting peace, both internally and externally? These are the questions that Watchmen raises and leaves with you. It does not patronize you by saying, here are the answers. We're raising a question, here's the answer, boom, done, we can all go home now. You don't have to think about it. No. It actually wonders, who are the bad guys in this world? Who are the good guys? Am I a good guy? Am I a bad guy? Who am I? What's my name? Where am I? These are all important questions that we need to ask ourselves. And I think that's what good stories, period, do. They raise questions, and they maybe give you their own ideas and their own messages and agendas, but ultimately, ultimate decision is left with us, the reader, the consumer. What do we make of this, and how does it inform our personal experience and our perspective on the world? And because that's the thing, when it really comes down to it, Watchmen is a story about different perspectives. Perspectives on superheroes, on politics, on life, and on how we can live our lives as human beings. I'm getting really deep into this because it's so good!
Did you read it as the individual floppies or as the big graphic novel?
I read it as a big graphic novel.
Fair enough. I'm showing my age now. Yeah. Because I read it as the individual floppies, and because you had the week to go in between the month, between each issue. A week, bloody hell.
It was a year.
You really had to, you broke, and you learnt about how it was pacing, and the way that Alan was really breaking down the story on a month-to-month basis. Even that, on a storytelling level, the pair of them absolutely created something special.
And we've had Dave Gibbs on the show. We didn't talk about Watchmen, but he really knows his stuff.
Doesn't he just?
I think it's safe to say.
It was a pleasure to be in the room when he got his Eisner Award. I was the one in the back cheering my head off. Fantastic.
Well deserved. But moving on, David, we're on the final round now. Give us your third and final, most inspirational comic.
All right, right, so I think this is easily the most obscure one that we'll probably have talked about so far.
I'll be the judge of that.
So I grew up on all the like American newspaper strips and things like that, and I was always getting the newspaper and stealing the comic section every day from my parents and going off and reading it, and then reading every single.
All right,
strip.
Garfield, what have you got for me this week?
Yeah, no, but it was literally like Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes, Foxtrot, that kind of stuff. And when I got older, I found that, those comics, a lot of those are for kids, a lot of them, in a lot of ways.
How dare you? Calvin and Hobbes is the most adult thing I've ever read.
I'm just saying, Calvin and Hobbes had ended at that time, so I needed something new.
Okay.
So I turned to webcomics, and the one webcomic that really got me back into that sort of daily format of the different strips is called Questionable Content. Mm-hmm. Okay, so someone has heard of it.
Yep.
Fine. It's been going for about 15 years now, and Jeff Schock, the creator, is crazy and wonderful. But it's just
a creative person being crazy. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah. So he's the comic is just about a group of people who live in Northampton, and it's just like a town outside of Boston, basically. And it's about a comic book shop, a coffee shop rather, called Coffee of Doom. It's also sort of about a guy who lives with his very small robot roommate, who's very crude, and it's also about like lately it's been about a robot repair shop and deals with the philosophical implications of having AI actually around in reality. Like it's also like very much like just slice of life comics. It's a really interesting thing, and I think the reason I picked it, it's to this day, it's the only webcomic that I will read every single day. There's still a lot of webcomics that I read, on and off. I'll sort of let them build up and then go through. But this is the only one that I have an app on my phone just so I can read this one webcomic. Mm-hmm. That's my commitment to it.
It's stuck with you.
It really has, and when we were thinking about this panel, I was thinking about one of the what comic I'm going to choose. I thought to myself, I've been reading this comic since 2006, pretty much every day, and that's been a huge chunk of my life. And that's definitely
that's been with you longer than a lot of people in your life right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's had a big impact on me. Also, it's one of the first web comics where I actually found myself buying merch. It got me to my first con because I really wanted to meet the creator, who was really nice.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Did you fanboy?
He looks so he looks like your classic biker. He's got his huge ears, tattoos everywhere, big bushy beard, and he's the nicest guy, really jovial and friendly and happy and stuff, but he looks like he should be a bassist in a metal band or something, which he also is. So it makes sense.
Twist.
Webcomics!
Cool.
I think moving on, Sarah.
That's quite an interesting point, though, because you think when someone says, what are the most influential comics on you, you always think, well, shall I try and do something impressive? Shall I think of something really, high?
Are you impressed, Capers?
Or shall I go for what genuinely did, inspire me? And I would have to say it's really tough, but it's two comics by the same artist, Rumiko Takahashi. She recently just got put into the Eisner Hall of Fame because she's probably one of the most hard-working manga artists and female artists in the history of ever. It's amazing. Her output is incredible. But it's so when I was younger, I used to read Ranma 1/2 when I got it from the library. Quite a crude story, but and that really influenced me. But I would say that my choice would more be Inuyasha, just because it had all of this influences from Japanese culture, which
I will become a full demon.
Well, yeah, as a teenager, I was like, oh my goodness, Japanese culture, this is so different and new.
The cowboy is
really
hot.
Big thing. Oh, yokai, what a yokai, this is great. And I think everybody my age was like, I want to make manga and draw Inuyasha over and over again. Boys with cat ears, great.
Is that where it comes from? Is that the ground zero?
Kind of, sort of, that, and there was another series called Loveless, and there was another one called Digicarrot, I want to say, that had lots of cat ears and dog ears and that kind of thing, cat girls. But but the thing that kind of ties it all together, I think, is just Rumiko Takahashi's style is just so effortless. Like, and it's not, you can see a lot of effort. It seems like it just flows from her hands, but obviously a lot of work has gone into it. And just, I'd never seen a comic that had been done so blatantly with a brush pen before, but had such beautiful detail in it. So, yeah, I think that was probably one of the more influential comics on me as a creator, especially with the whole fantasy element. Come on,
Yeah.
I'm all about fantasy now.
Because we love that. Yeah. You come up with a great comic with a world full of like orcs and fire spirits and all sorts. I think it's safe to say you're kind of a fan of fantasy.
But I think it was a really long time coming for her to get that Hall of Fame. Definitely.
How she didn't win it before was.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's a long list. For
Damn you,
long time.
patriarchy again!
I think that's the one thing about this year's Hall of Fame was every single person could have won it, and just the amount of people that were up for it was just amazing.
And every time it came up, they were like,
It's
"Well,
just-
she
really should be, absolutely.
But at the same time, like, you know, whose turn is it?
Yeah,
like, it's
pretty
that
much.
thing, isn't
And
it?
meanwhile,
It's
the
really
Oscars
hard.
is introducing a popular category.
Don't even start me on that. Okay.
We don't have the time.
No.
Moving on.
I know I've picked individual issues or a comic annual. I'm going to go for an actual comic run, which is Justice League International from DC Comics.
Woo! You're dead to me.
Ah, well, I'm sure I'll survive somehow.
You'll recover.
This was another one which kind of showed me another way of telling stories. If anything, for the writing. This is Keith Giffen on writing. This is J.M. DeMatteis on art. And it's basically about a international arm of Justice League Justice League America. In that it's the second tier. It's the bunch that nobody wants.
Booster Gold!
Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, Fire and Ice. I mean, those two. And you had...
What's your power? I make fire. We'll call you fire. What do you do? I make ice. We'll call you Captain Cold. That's taken. Oh, fine. I'll just call you ice.
You just had Guy Gardner as the Green Lantern. All these characters that were just brought together, and they were just like the second stringers. But Batman was in there to kind of hold things together. Martian Manhunter was in there as kind of like the big daddy of the whole thing to kind of work. You had Dr. Fate, who had just changed sex, or was just about to, or changed sex during the run. Okay. It was just... Everyone was just
Imagine
like...
that, a male
everyone
doctor
was just
becoming a female doctor. I've never heard of such
They'll
Good
never
point.
do it.
Well, they'll never do it. It'll never
No.
happen. It was funny, it was self-aware, it was one of the first meta comics that I ever read where you almost felt they were doing a full nod and a wink to the audience. The artwork was amazing because DeMatteis is just incredible, but it was all about the scripts and they were just so funny. They just...
Well, Guy Gardner in it, it's got to be funny.
Oh, well, he was just this absolute male chauvinist dick. He was just, and somehow he became charming throughout the course of the run, and that's down to Keith. That's Keith Giffen for you. And I know one of the most famous panels in there is One Punch. He's just such an arse. He ends up going up into Batman's face, and Batman just locks him out in one punch. And
Because I'm Batman.
there's Black Canary in the team doesn't want to be there at all. She walks in, seeing Guy Gardner sparked out on the floor, goes, I can't believe I missed it. And there's everyone else thinking that she's just going to lose it because she missed Batman.
Please, someone take a picture.
It's so funny. But the thing is, it also has this real steel under there as well. There's some story. Certainly in the first two runs, there's some real steel in there. When they're discovering some really nasty, some of the worst villains that I've seen in a DC book. Some real son of a bitches. And it's how the hell Keith Giffen did it, balancing those tones. I go back to that book more often than I can imagine, or I'll admit, because it's just such an incredible piece of work. So there you go, that's mine. It's Justice League
That's
International.
a good one. Lyndon, your final one.
Final one. Mine's Bone by Jeff Smith.
Yay!
Which I think has influenced my artwork incredibly, which is odd because if you look at my artwork, you won't see it at first glance. But even how he does the paneling has influenced how I try and tell my stories. Bone is about 3 brothers who are Bones. They come from Boneville, and they.
I think you'll find they're cousins.
Cousins? Oh, I stand corrected,
Oh, that's what I'm here for.
sir. Yeah, correction. Thank you. And they fall into the valley, and it quickly becomes this epic fantasy meets Saturday morning cartoon humour. And it's hilarious. There's mystery. There's a great cow race, which is probably one of the funniest comic sequences I've ever seen.
Which is not cows racing each other, it's cows racing this one old lady. And she always wins.
Yeah. Plus a person dressed up as a cow.
Oh, the mystery cow.
Yeah, the mystery cow. It's something I read every 1 to 2 years. My copy is in utter tatters because anyone who hasn't read it, I've literally thrown it at them, which has probably bruised them.
How dare you!
Yeah, exactly.
The collected volume of that is a big book.
That
must hurt.
Yeah, I got really annoyed at a friend of mine because he hadn't read it. I lent it him, and he was taking so long to read it that I asked him for it back because I wanted to read it again. And he still hasn't read it, so he's getting it for Christmas.
Nice.
But they've recently done a coloured version as well. But it is originally in black and white. You can read it in colour, but it's something that I think everyone should read at least once. And Jeff Smith is like a master at storytelling and setting up humour before it actually happens. And rat creatures are the best.
Stupid rat creatures!
They're brilliant. They love quiche. They're the best creatures. One of them likes quiche. And they're some of the best creatures you'll see in fantasy. They're brilliant.
I completely agree with you, and I agree with you to the point where I was going to do Bone as my next one. You stole it from me!
We should have talked about
Yeah,
it.
we should have beforehand. But
We
it's
had
okay.
no preparation to this at all. We are surprising each other with each other's choices.
I think it's good for me to react to them. But then I do have another one I want to talk about then. If you were talking about Bone, you talked about it very well. I want to talk about Why the Last Man.
Nice.
It had a very similar impact on me as Bone did, which was, I think it came slightly before Bone actually, so it makes more sense. I'm sort of charting my progression through life. Kid reading Amazing Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man. An adolescent reading Watchmen. And so as a young adult, as a 20-something, sitting down to read Why the Last Man. This is one of the first comic books I sort of read that wasn't about superheroes for once. And because believe it or not, there are comic books and graphic novels about superheroes. I don't know if you're aware of that. And it's one of this brilliant premise. We were talking about it earlier in the day. Brilliant premise that every single mammal in the world with a Y chromosome just died except for this one guy and his monkey, which does sound like a great setup for a sitcom, but it's not a sitcom. But as I was saying, it goes beyond the premise, exploring deeper themes about feminism and women and the relationship to men, and also just general humanity. There's so many great ideas that it fully explores, and it really it's one of the best stories, not just comic book stories, best stories I've ever read. And Brian K. Vaughan swiftly became one of my favourite writers until he did Saga, which I do not like. Why is the tree the ship? I'm not going to.
We've already had a few conversations about this today, and I've already heard Scott's rants about it.
The baby is the narrator! I don't... No. Why The Last Man is so great, and it's such a great core of characters. It explores so many different things like...
You can just interrupt it if you want.
I'm not going to interrupt at all. I'm just going to sit here and stew nicely.
I'm so sorry.
It is one of the greatest comics ever written, and you will never, ever, ever take that away from it.
Can I put the moderate voice in and say, it's okay?
Okay, the recent couple of volumes are okay. Right, move on.
We're not here to talk about something that I don't
Yes.
like. We're do,
Talk about something you do like.
It's like, the thing about Why the Last Man, it's not just about this one guy, it's about these other group of characters. They all are unique, have their own unique motivations swirling around them, and explores different ideas about philosophies and mythologies. And that's the great thing about it. We never get a definitive answer, minor spoiler, about what caused all the creatures with Y chromosomes to die out. There's lots of different theories and things that you might think work one way or the other, or have greater impacts. But we never get a definitive answer. It's more about focusing on the survival of us as a species, but also about a survival of us just in terms of who we are. Again, it's something, I think that's the best stories I like. Stories that examine us as people, that chart our progress as human beings. Because when you really stop and think about it, this idea of us being human, once we go beyond the mere biology, it's a very fluid thing. It's very ephemeral. And to take a certain stance in it, but also show other stances and show other perspectives, that's something I really like, because we as human beings, I personally believe, are very individualistic. You stick 3 people in a room, they're going to have 10 different opinions.
As you've just seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something that explores humanity in all its growth and splendor is something that I really, it's something that I really, when we talk about on the podcast, I talk about how we need better representation in media. That's because I want all of humanity to be explored and represented as much as we can. And that's, I think, the great thing about comics as a medium. It's something to explore human beings and our ability to tell stories, whether it be small, tiny stories like just for kids in The Dandy, much more grown-up stories in Watchmen, or much more out there, wacky stuff in manga. It's something that has such a huge breadth and complexity, which I think is emblematic of us as human beings. And on that impactful and slightly pretentious note, I think we're going to end the show. Thank you all of my guests for joining me today.
That was an abrupt ending, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
It's no problem. I like to just snatch the ending away from you as we go.
That's what they call in the trade a smash cut. Congratulations, well done.
And Capers, I hope you enjoy the show. If you want to hear more from us, you can find us on Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, lots of other places. Google it, you know how to work a computer. And if you want to contact us, suggest show topics, or maybe come on the show yourself, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, email us.
HYC is our
Google Plus, MySpace,
Friendster.
have a MySpace at one point.
Dave's house.
Hotel.
But don't find us on MySpace anymore. It's not good. I mean, MySpace is fine. Just I haven't been upkeeping the page. I don't know how it is.
We're everywhere. We talk about lots of different things, and we always have a great time. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you all for listening. This has been Podcapers, the official podcast of A Place to Hang Your Cape. You can clap now. New music. You disappoint me at every turn, David.